Today we're diving into one of the most shocking, most complete, and honestly most important defeats in the entire history of the Roman Empire. And it all starts with a sentence that just sends a chill down your spine.
Just let that sink in for a second. An execution. That's not a fight, right? That's a foregone conclusion. It implies there was never any chance. And for three of Rome's most elite legions, that's exactly what happened when they marched into a dark German forest.
And look, we're not talking about some rookie soldiers here. We're talking about the 17th, the 18th, and the 19th legions. These were the pros. Hardened veterans, the absolute backbone of an empire that had steamrolled pretty much the entire known world. They were, for all intents and purposes, unstoppable.
But this army, this incredible symbol of Roman order and power, made one single fatal decision. They left the open fields where they were masters of war and marched straight into the dense, dark, claustrophobic woods of Germania.
Not one of them. The entire force, 20,000 men, including soldiers, officers, their families, they just vanished from the face of the earth. So how on earth could this happen? To get that, we have to rewind a little.
All right, so picture this. It's 89. As far as Rome is concerned, Germania is basically a done deal. They see it as a conquered province. They're not fighting a war anymore. They're setting up an administration. They're mapping out roads, imposing Roman law, figuring out tax collection. Their confidence isn't just high, it's absolute. And that right there is the problem.
At the center of this whole story, you've got two main characters. On one side, there's Publius Quintilius Varus. He's the Roman governor. Now, it's key to know he's a politician, an administrator, not a general. On the other side, you have Arminius. And this is where it gets really interesting. Arminius is a German prince, yeah, but he was raised in Rome. He speaks perfect Latin. He holds Roman citizenship. He's even an officer in the Roman auxiliary forces. For Varus, Arminius is living proof that his job is done, that the Germans are on board. But behind the scenes, Arminius is unifying the tribes for a reckoning.
So yeah, this disaster was no accident. It wasn't some spontaneous uprising. This was a trap. A meticulously engineered ambush, and it was all designed by one man who knew the Romans inside and out. He knew their strengths, but far more importantly, he knew their weaknesses, especially their arrogance. So how did he do it? It was a masterpiece of deception. First, he comes to Varus with a warning about a small, fake rebellion happening in a remote area. Second, he insists that Varus needs to march immediately to put it down, to make an example of them. Third, and this is the genius part, he suggests a shortcut, right through the treacherous Teutoburg Forest, a place no Roman army in its right mind would ever go. And just like that, Varus takes the bait, leading his men straight into the kill box.
And their marching formation tells you everything you need to know about their mindset. They weren't in battle formation. They were stretched out in a single, thin column that went on for miles, all mixed up with baggage carts and camp followers. They didn't even bother sending scouts ahead. Why would they? This wasn't a war. This was just a routine police action, and their good friend Arminius was showing them the way.
And this is the exact moment the trap springs shut. Arminius tells Varus, hey, I'm just going to ride ahead and round up some of our local allies to help out. He waves goodbye, rides over a hill, and he never comes back. Because the allies he was gathering were actually his own warriors, lying in wait for the slaughter to begin. And then, all at once, the forest just erupted. That casual march turned into an absolute nightmare. A chaotic, desperate fight for survival that would drag on for 3 straight days of hell on earth.
You see, the Germanic tribes didn't just fight in the forest. They used the forest as their main weapon. A huge storm rolls in, turning the narrow path into a muddy swamp. The trees were so thick the Romans couldn't form their famous battle lines. Their huge shields kept getting caught on branches. Their heavy armor was a death sentence in the muck. And the whole time, javelins are just raining down on them from warriors they can't even see.
And that was the whole point. All of Rome's legendary tactics were completely useless here. They were built for open-field combat, for discipline and formation. But there was no battle line to hold. There was no enemy cavalry to counter. It was just a non-stop rolling ambush from every direction. For 3 days, the attacks just kept coming. The legions weren't defeated in one go. They were systematically dismantled piece by bloody piece. Every attempt to make a fortified camp failed. Every attempt to break out was cut off. It was a slow, agonizing, grinding annihilation. By the 3rd day, whatever hope was left was gone. Varus finally understood the absolute hopelessness of it all. There was no escape,
no rescue was coming. So, surrounded by the wreckage of his army and his own shattered reputation, he did what many disgraced Roman commanders did. He took his own life.
But Varus's death didn't change anything for his men. The battle was over, but its consequences were just starting. The shockwaves from this one event would ripple all the way back to Rome and end up changing the map of Europe forever.
The sheer scale of the disaster was just mind-boggling. Any survivors were hunted down and either enslaved or sacrificed to the Germanic gods. But the ultimate humiliation? The sacred legionary eagles, the golden standards of each legion, were captured. You have to understand these weren't just flags. They were seen as the divine spirit of the legion. Losing them was a sacrilege, a blow just as devastating as losing all the men. In fact, Rome was so ashamed they struck the numbers 17, 18, and 19 from the military rolls forever. It was as if they never even existed.
When the news finally reached Emperor Augustus in Rome, he was said to have been completely broken by it. The stories say he would wander the halls of his palace, banging his head against the walls and just crying out, "Varus, give me back my legions." It wasn't just about the soldiers, it was a deep psychological shock to an empire that genuinely thought it was invincible.
So, why does this one battle matter so much 2,000 years later? Well, first, it was Rome's single greatest defeat in centuries. But more importantly, it stopped Roman expansion dead in its tracks. The Rhine River became the permanent border of the empire. They never again made a serious, long-term attempt to conquer the lands of Germania. This one battle essentially drew the line between the Latin-Roman world and the Germanic world, a divide that has shaped European history ever since.
And that really brings us back to the heart of it all. In an open battle, the legions would have crushed the Germanic tribes. Rome wasn't defeated by a superior army or a better weapon. It was defeated by its own blinding arrogance and by the absolute, unquestioning trust it put in a man who was secretly plotting its doom.
It's just a powerful reminder that sometimes the biggest weaknesses aren't in your battle lines, but in your own head. And it leaves you wondering, doesn't it? How many other massive turning points in history weren't decided by swords and shields, but by a single catastrophic act of betrayal?